Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Grossman Files. Hey. We got a great one for you today. Yes. We got a great one for you today. And today's actually going to be a little bit dense. It's going to be a hearkening back to the old school of the series where we got a lot of documents to show and a lot of analysis to do, all in the service of what? Well, trying to figure out, did Berkey kill Kennedy? Did Kirby kill Kennedy? I mean, did Berkey kill Kennedy? That's what we're trying to figure out today. Did Berkey kill Kennedy? And you guys actually think I mean the real John F. Kennedy? What are you, crazy? No, we're talking about John Kennedy of 2800 Bailey Avenue in the Bronx, who in 1977, right, a couple months after the arrest of Berkowitz, his sister, whose name was Margaret Sciblo, actually of Riverdale, who didn't live too far from where I was living at the time, right around the block, in fact, where she came forward to the authorities and said, Berkey killed Kennedy. So, I often get comments like in the wake of our absolute bombshell revelation of Wendy Savino work that, I've often said anybody could do Wendy, and she was out there ripe and ready to pluck for any of the Son of Sam searchers to find out. But the more I think about it, actually, the more, no, only we could have found Wendy, because you have to have a certain mindset and in order to find Wendy. So the absolute bombshell of Wendy, of course, the amazing speculation that is the Bronx Sniper, which is capturing the Son of Sam community by storm, and also outlets like the New York Post, who were very interested, and of course now being followed up on in the international media by outlets such as the Daily Mail, who didn't reach out to me for a comment, but got a whole article on Berkowitz talking about how I'm evil and and how I'm committing a hate crime against him. So, but one of the things that these low-level thinkers always say to me is, "Oh, did Berkey do every crime in the Bronx? Are you going to pin everything on him? Did Berkey kill? Did he do the Manson murders?" Actually, I shouldn't ask that. The Maury Terry fans would probably say yes. Did he do? Did he shoot JFK? Did he shoot RFK too? Is he doing all those too? And of course, the answer to those, of course, is no. It's patently ridiculous. Why are you even bringing up RFK and JFK? I mean, you might as well be bringing up aliens. I mean, who's talking about RFK and JFK? And did Berkey kill Sirhan? And did he do anything? Who's talking about that? I certainly am not. We've only been dealing in facts. So we have Wendy Savino, who's to me, an open and shut case. And of course, the New York Police Department closed it out as such. And then the speculation, which to this day, no one's been able to come up to me and say, this is why Berkey needs to be taken out of Bronx Sniper, because on this and such a date, he was here, or it's impossible for him to have done this because of this fact of his life. And he didn't know the area, like you say, because he actually went to synagogue somewhere else. And you're mistaken about that. Like nobody's come up to me yet and done anything like that. The best we've gotten is a flaccid old man's ejaculate comparison by Paul Hart Berger saying, malicious drug gangs did it. Yeah, malicious drug gang just happened to be on one block stretch of 169th Street, shooting random people, mostly females, all innocent. None of them are gang members having anything to do with it. And they just get away with it and nobody dimes them out. And it's malicious drug gangs just doing it at one thing. I mean, give me a break. Anyway, yeah, MLK and Malcolm X too. But when I actually went back into my archives and looked at this file that I had, this interesting case of John Kennedy, I realized, wait a second, did Berkey kill Kennedy? And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. So again, today's an old school show. It's going to be quite dense. There's a lot of documents to look at, and all in the service of, did Berkowitz kill John Kennedy? And of course, we are talking about John Kennedy of 2800 Bailey Avenue in the Bronx, whose sister Margaret Sciblo came forward in 1977 saying, Berkey killed my brother. Nobody's ever heard of this case before. Certainly no one has ever seen these documents before. Nobody ever knew that the authorities took very seriously enough to bring this to to Mario Merola, who actually did question, investigate this this somewhat, unlike Wendy Savino's story, of course. So this is just another little interesting appendix, side note, footnote to the Son of Sam story. It also goes to the whole notion of that people in the wake of the arrest do in fact come forward with stories like Wendy did and say, hey, Berkowitz was the perpetrator of my crime too. And so the only thing that we can do is analyze these cases as they come forward and say, all right, is there anything here that we can grab onto as a possible Berkey crime? Or is this not a Berkey crime? Or with me in the case of Wendy was, wow, this is obviously a Berkey crime. So I'm going to leave it up to you. We're just going to strictly go through the facts as they are. I'm going to try to editorial. I'm keeping Nick's thing on very long. I'm going to try to editorialize as little as possible. And hopefully you'll find this interesting. And one of the reasons I'm just laying this on the line, I lay it on the line. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Lay it on the line. Don't waste my time. One of the reasons I'm doing this is because hopefully this will stop the one criticism of that everyone seems to make, again, a baseless critique, which is, are you trying to pin every crime on Berkowitz? And I don't know, we'll see. We'll see what's up. Yo, what's up, Victoria and Brian the kitty? I see you got Rush tickets. That's cool. Appreciate it. Hopefully you'll enjoy the show. Rush has been stumbling over themselves lately, doing a lot of dumb things, in my opinion. Not the reunion. I'm down with the reunion. Really don't care so much that Peart is gone. Not as a human being. I'm talking about as a drummer. Even though I grew up with Peart, and Peart was like my man, and I even wore a vest and a white dress shirt and a red bow tie to Bronx Science every now and then, in honor of what he wore on Exit Stage Left, which was my gateway into I don't remember exactly how I came to. I think what it was I started playing drums at the age of 13, and then I started getting the magazines, and I would see Neil Peart's name everywhere. And then I went to Roberta's Video City on McLean Avenue in Yonkers, and I rented Exit Stage Left. And right from the start, it blew me away, and that was it. So anyway, but getting back to my point, Peart he lost it. In fact, I told this story on one of my other shows, so I won't belabor it. But I was there the night that history of music changed. I was there the night that the mighty Neil Peart got his ass whooped in a drum battle on the stage of the Ritz, the old Studio 54. at the Buddy Rich show, and I think it was 1990, but it might have been 1991. Anyway, let's carry on because we actually have a lot to do. So let's look at the case. I'm going to try not to editorialize. At the end of this show, you may either be like, yo, this is another Berkey victim. Or you might be like, yeah, nah, this isn't. And at the end, I'll give you my verdict as well. All right, so let's look at the basic facts of the case. Whoops, give me a second here. So these are all original documents. This is the medical examiner when they came to the home of John Kennedy. So you thought I was kidding, right? At 2800 Bailey Avenue, apartment 44B. Uh-oh, it's 44. It's a sign. That looks like this is the writing of the Breslin letter. That's a Berkey M. All right. This is the medical examiner's report, 50th precinct. So this is them finding found face down in bedroom, history of alcohol, liver something or other, family notified. All right. So this is the medical examiner comes to the apartment, 2800 Bailey Avenue. We're going to look at all this on Google Earth. And this takes place in, it doesn't say here, but it's in March of 1976. Okay. March 10th, 1976. This is 78 for some reason. Maybe it takes a couple years for these things to process. I have no idea. So that was the medical examiner's notice of death, all right, of John Kennedy, age 45, found face down in his bedroom, family notified. What's up, Sam Fowler? So great to see y'all here, everybody. We got Blacked Out, we got Victoria, we got Nick, we got Sam Fowler, we got Rubes, we got the Queen Ruby of the house. We got Derek Larson in the house? I don't know. Yeah, Derek Larson's in the house. The people of the so-called world. Oh, people of the world. The people. All right. So what happens now? So this death of Kennedy takes place in 76. It takes place in March of 76. All right. So this is even before Wendy. This is a month before Wendy. So when does the family come forward and say this is Berkowitz? Well, of course, it would have to be after they knew of Berkowitz's existence, which would, of course, have to be after the arrest. So this was the document here in which the family comes forward of John Kennedy to the Bronx DA on December 7th, 1977. No interpreter needed. You had Margaret Sciblo. You had, I don't know what this says, Shalom Sciblo. And they live at 3615 Greystone Avenue in the Bronx. Okay, that's in Riverdale. That's actually, for those of you who are heads of my series, that's actually right around where Nikolai Aman used to hang out, where, see, it's all connected. I can make these connections too, right? Like if I wanted to. But that's right where Nikolai Aman used to hang out. In fact, in 1978, no, it was a little too early, but I had a friend who lived right across the street from that building. And I used to go there all the time. So we're going to look at that on Google Earth and so on and so forth. So anyway, so the family lives in Riverdale. The brother, John Kennedy, lives on Bailey Avenue, which is called Down the Hill. It's close by, but it's in a section called Kingsbridge, which is a little less she than Riverdale. Let's put it that way. So, all right, let's see what this says here. It's a little hard to read. I'm going to try to read it for you so it makes sense. Basic allegations. Believe that her brother, while a patient at FDR VA Hospital in Montrose, New York, was brutally beaten and assaulted by another patient that both believed to have been David Berkowitz, and that as a result of such a beating on February 20th, complainant witness's brother, John Joseph Kennedy, died on March 10th, 1976 in his apartment. Often after releasing from the VA hospital. John Kennedy was a patient from February 16th, 76 to March 3rd, 76, when he was discharged on February 20th, 76. He was assaulted and beaten by another patient and no medical attention given until Sunday after complainant witness came to visit. They described assailant, an unnamed hospital something did also. They described assault, an unnamed hospital. I can't read that. Eyewitness did also, maybe. Complainant witness saw the assailant. Okay, so right here is the basic facts of the case. Her brother was staying in the VA hospital in Montrose, New York, which we'll look at. He was brutally beaten, they say, by an assailant. They say that assailant was David Berkowitz, who was staying at the VA. Now, that would make sense to a degree, right? Berkowitz was a veteran. But of course, they could have found that out from the reports in the newspaper, right? So you always have to keep these things in mind when things are being told post arrest. So they're saying that the brother was at the VA with David Berkowitz. Berkowitz beat the shit out of him. He came home and then died as a result of that beating. So this actually went to the DA Shalek. This is a freaking name that's in the People versus David Berkowitz on the JULTAC. You'll see these names all over the New York Police Department investigation files, right? JULTAC notified Marola by phone. All right, on 12/14/77. On 12/15/77, Shalek called JULTAC. On 4/28/78, so 4 months later, JULTAC says Berkowitz denies this. Okay, so now we actually have Berkowitz knowing about this case. So Claw, you could ask your boy about this. Tell him his friend Manny is talking about this case. So follow up. All right, so complainant witness saw the assailant and believe assailant to be the same David Berkowitz, the .44 caliber killer. John Kennedy was discharged. He went to his apartment at 2800 Bailey Avenue and was found dead in a pool of blood on March 10th. 50th Precinct detectives handled the, I don't know what that says. It says homicide, but I don't know if that was it. Police believe he had died as a result from his medical problem, as was an admitted alcoholic. Complainant witnesses made complaint also to Detective Cavallino, State Trooper Peekskill, the head psychologist at FDR Montrose VA Hospital, and Congressman Bingham. Detective Nicholson of 50th PIU handled homicide investigation. You're right. It does say homicide. Okay. So now let's talk about this a little. Let's reason and let's talk about this and about these things. And if anybody wants to call in, I'm gonna give me an invite. I'm gonna put the thing for anybody who cares to call in. We're gonna be here a little while. I hope you don't mind. Okay, this is not gonna be so much a comedy show as it is looking at and reading documents, because this may be boring. It's actually probably is boring, but this was on record. This existed as a case. Did Berkey kill Kennedy? Why has Manny never talked about this before? I thought Manny was a publicity hound that wanted attention for every possible case that Berkowitz has been accused of. I thought that's what I'm all about, right? Just shameless promotion. So, all right. So there you have it. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these places on Google Earth. Give me a second. Let me just see where we're at here. Okay, all right. So let's read this last document before we look at the places on Google Earth. All right, so this was written, obviously, this is the same handwriting as this. So I believe this was written by ADAE, and I can't make that out. Okay, but a very distinctive handwriting, which we do see on this by this. So Sam says most true crime research is kind of dry. So Ruby says, why this hasn't been mentioned before? Well, because nobody has my influence, Ruby. You know that. Nobody has nobody has the documents like we do. I mean, yeah, it was cool to get a couple of Berkowitz's letters that we would have gotten anyway a couple of years ago, and they were helpful for sure. Not going to deny that. But where has been the revelation since those letters 5 years ago or 4 years ago, right? But here we are still coming out with new documents, Ruby. And that's why it hasn't been mentioned before. Yes, he's an assassin and disco superstar. So, all right. So let's read this together. So this was, I believe this was either a follow-up or the last part of the statement. The above complainant witnesses do not appear to be mentally unbalanced or crazy. They firmly believe that David Berkowitz was a patient at FDR VA Hospital during the time that John Joseph Kennedy was also a patient there. They also feel that Berkowitz was the one who assaulted their brother. Contrary to the autopsy report, which lists the cause of death as acute ethyl alcohol, aminobarbital, and secobarbital poisoning, the CWs claim the death was due to the beating allegedly administered by Berkowitz. Note, a letter is enclosed by Dr. Chase, chief medical director at FDR, indicating that Kennedy was attacked by another patient. Kennedy was diagnosed as a chronic alcoholic and a paranoid schizophrenic. CWs also claim the autopsy was altered by Dr. Chase and that there is a cover-up of the fact that, as they allege, Berkowitz was at the VA hospital and let loose, despite his violent tendencies being manifest. The letters shown to me and enclosed seem to bear out the material facts, but with plausible explanations. There is only the CW's word contending Berkowitz's presence as a patient at FDR and whether he assaulted and did cause the death of Kennedy. I enclose the following for your perusal and use if you deem there is anything substantial to look into. Oh, I'm sure this will. I'm sure he'll make this. So, any relation to the Kennedy family? I doubt it, Meb. It's like people blame me for being part of the North Fox Island sex ring because there was a person whose last name was Grossman that was allegedly involved in that. I really never looked that up. Again, I'm not interested in sex crimes against children. It's not somewhere that I put my mind into. Yeah, people went on that for years, Meb. They were like, man, he's related to Dyer Grossman. And I always said, well, first of all, I'm not related to Dyer Grossman. Never heard of the guy in my life. But second of all, even if Dyer Grossman was my brother, how would that mean that I'm forensically, criminologically involved with him and his crimes? Like, that's the thing that the conspiracy theorists, the last namers, never, ever take that next leap. All right. I'm not here I'm going to start complaining about the morons again. I don't want to do that. All right. So, yes, he's picking fights with everybody lately. It's crazy. All right, so let's take a look at Google Earth and let's look at these places before we carry on. And let's look here, starting at, my friends, the wonderful borough of the Bronx, the famous borough of the Bronx, the borough that you know and love. And we are going to start, and we're now in February of 1976, right? So think about it. There is a little gap in Berkowitz's timeline around that period. I'm going to use the phrase I hate the most. There's two modern phrases I hate. Not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie. And to be honest, because first of all, if you have to say to be honest, what does that mean? It means every other time you're lying. You're only honest when you preface something by saying to be honest. That makes no sense. And then the same thing is the ghetto version is not gonna lie. Why would you say that? First of all, that means that you're lying every other time you speak. And then second of all, you're putting into the speaker's mind that you're a liar because you're saying, I'm not going to lie, which means you've been lying up to that point. Like, so Americans, stop using those two phrases, please. But there was a gap in Berkowitz's biography around this time period, January, February. He was living ostensibly in Barnes Avenue in the Bronx. Right. But then he moves to Casara's house and nobody can say exactly when that happened. Nobody can give like a firm date on when any of these things happened, when he moved out of Casara and when he moved into, when he moved into Barnes and when he moved out of Barnes and into Casara. So this is around that time period. And I highly doubt that Margaret Sciblo knew Berkowitz's history at that point of February 76. Even if she had read every newspaper in report, there wasn't really much reportage vis-a-vis, here in February of 76, Berkowitz was right here, and this is exactly where he was. Right? And so there is a plausible, reasonable person could think that there was a possibility that in this time period, Berkowitz, February 76, was indeed at the VA hospital in Montrose, New York. Now, why would he be up there as opposed to the VA hospital in the Bronx, which was literally only a 10-minute drive from where he lived, as opposed to an hour north? I don't know that question. Again, we're just putting out these things. You guys decide for yourself. I'm trying to keep my mouth shut about these things. I've been accused of saying, did he kill Kennedy? So we're looking, did he kill Kennedy? All right. So Berkowitz lived at this period of his life at 2161 Barnes Avenue, which I don't know why it turns me north to south. That's freaking annoying. But let's reorient this to the north to south. So now the top is north and the bottom is south. So 2161 Barnes Avenue. He's living right about here. Okay, right about here. We don't need to go down to the do we see, can you guys, I don't know if you can see my arrow, but 2161 Barnes Avenue. So we just pull out a little bit. You can see that's the East Bronx. This is the area where Nina's restaurant was, where Donna Loria was shot, where Placido, Suriani, Esau, and Donna Loria and Judy Placido were shot, where Wendy Savino was shot. So this is 2161 Barnes Avenue. The VA hospital, now we're going to go way north. The VA hospital is way up here in Westchester County, up by like Indian Point Nuclear Power Plant. Let's see, can we get on that campus? Doesn't look like we can get on that campus, but it's a huge sprawling campus. You can see it's quite large. Whoops, sorry. So we're back here. And again, the Hudson River is right over here. And just zooming out a little bit, the VA hospital will be right here. And then just go down the river and eventually you hit New York City right here. Okay. So the VA hospital in the Bronx was much closer. So why would he be at the VA hospital? So then we have 2800 Bailey Avenue, which just to give you a little bird's eye view of the Bronx here again, this is 2161 Barnes down here. I don't know if like if my arrow's showing up, but 2161 Barnes is down here, and then 2800 Bailey's right here. And then 3615 Greystone is right there. So he lived in this building here. Let's take a look at it. This is where they found the body of Johnny Sciblo. Oh, sorry, John Kennedy. And it ain't the one from Washington. And then the sister lived up by Riverdale, which would be up here near where I lived, 3615 Greystone Avenue, which was right here in this building right here. So this is where Nikolai Aman used to hang out. So the sister lived here in Riverdale. Her brother lived down the hill in the kind of a crappier area. And let me tell you something, Riverdale's kind of weird, even though it's a more upscale neighborhood. This block of Greystone Avenue is actually kind of ghetto, not like Harlem or anything or South Bronx, but it's not quite as upscale as the rest of Riverdale. And that's true even of this day. One of my best friends, Greg DeMamos, lived in this building right here. I used to hang out there all the time. And Nikolai lived right up the block, and his mother lived up the block. And just for the hell of it, I'll show you where I grew up. Where would that be? Advanced dental care. Hold on, I gotta pull out a little bit here. Here, this is where I grew up. So this is 3615 Greystone. I grew up right here. So this was my building. That's where the G-Man, from 76 to when I moved out when I was about, I don't know, 21, 20, something like that. So that's the block where the G-Man lived. That's the building. Oh, thank God I don't live in New York City anymore. That place is gone. So anyway, so now you have a little bit of an idea as to the area in which we're talking about. So let's get back to the material, shall we? And let me take a look at the Berkey could have been a supervillain in an Austin Powers movie. The smirking chubby behemoth. This is the first live podcast. Big Manny, fan of man. Hey, what's up, Anthony? How you doing, man? Great to see you here. Yes, we went to the same junior high school 10 years apart. 141. I graduated in 87. All right. So now we know the basics of the case. So again, to remind you, John Kennedy, patient at FDR Montrose. While there, he's beaten and assaulted. Everybody agrees he was beaten and assaulted. But he's also an alcoholic. He's on Seconembutals. He's on barbitals. He's on Barbasol. He's constantly shaving his face with Barbasol. He's on everything. Nemobarbutal. He's on all of that. But he was also beaten. Now he gets discharged. He goes back to 2800, where like a few weeks later, he's found dead on the floor in a pool of blood and vomit. Okay. So and then the family then, after the arrest of Berkowitz, they then go and say, it was Berkey. He did it. He was a patient at FDR Montrose. So this is Sciblo's. So that's Sciblo's story in 77. After Berkowitz's arrest, Margaret Sciblo, she decides to come forward and say to the DA, yo, Berkey did this to my brother. I want this investigated as a Son of Sam homicide. You let him out. He was a known violent tendencies. He was at your FDR VA hospital. We eyewitnessed him. He beat the shit out of my brother. Then my brother died a month later due to the beating, even though he was a secobarbital addict and an alcoholic. we want something done. I, Margaret Sciblo, want something done. So that was her in 77. That was her post arrest, December of 1977. Now, remember when Wendy came to the Bronx DA, that was actually 2 months before. She came to the Bronx DA in October of 77. And she didn't wait 4 months. She immediately, the day Berkowitz was arrested, came forward and went to the authorities. Okay. So there's some basic differences here between, a person two people coming forward after the arrest of someone, one of whom has a story whose crime was a son of Sam crime. We're talking about Wendy in the terms of the MO, place, time of occurrence, same MO, everything checks out, identical sketch. Berkowitz, of course, now lies about it completely, just like he lies about Bronx Sniper. But then you have this Sciblo story, which of course you're only hearing about for the first time through the G-Man in 2026. All right, so yeah, Sam, let's keep going because we got some files. So that was Sciblo's story in 77. Now I hope you guys smoke a joint, take some Quaaludes or Valium, drink something, because we're going to read a 4-page letter now written by Margaret Sciblo in all of its glory. But this was her story in 1976. This was before she knew of Berkowitz. Let's read Sciblo's story in 76. May 9th, 1976. 3615 Greystone Avenue. Dear sirs, I will fill you in on the details as I have known it, seen it. My husband and I bought my brother, John J. Kennedy, who was receiving a non-service connected disability, to the Franklin Delano Roosevelt Hospital on February 17th, 1976. We heard that my brother, as the woe, is used to us as acting weird. He has been a patient there a few times before. A Mr. Thomas admitted him. He was assigned to the building 13C and D, and were as in the past, he was in building 6A and B. Remember, I'm reading this as is. Sunday, the 22nd of February, 76, we went to see John. I could not believe what I saw. My brother had been brutally beaten about the head, eye, ribs, groin, and left leg. He was in C, shock, and severe depression. Also shoeless, as someone had stolen his shoes that night or early morning before the beating, which occurred Friday, February 2076, 3:30 p.m. Uh-oh, don't tell Jason Goodman that. Mine. This happened in a closed ward hallway. Where was your staff and aides to prevent this? He was given absolutely no medical attention that he deeply needed. However, a doctor whose name I will not give at this time told him just to go to bed. When I saw John, I started to yell and scream at the nurse on duty, who couldn't give me any answers to why my brother is in a government hospital, was not medically attended to. This I would expect in a city or a state hospital, but never where men have been given time there in a country in some branches. You know what? I'm not going to read this whole freaking thing. I'm just going to let you screenshot it. I'm just going to go through slowly. You could read it yourself by pausing. We're just going to go through the greatest hits, because God, is this boring to just read and read and read. It's much better if I paraphrase. So she's going over here talking about how he was barefooted, he didn't have food, the doctors sucked, right? No, nothing about like David Berkowitz or a patient there who they saw beat him or that they were told about. At the time, there was a staff meeting. The patient went on. I told him my brother had to see the doctor. So now she goes and she's trying to get a doctor. And this is kind of funny, because it says here that she said that they told her to go see this doctor. And when she went to go see the doctor, he said he didn't have any time. He was annoyed and said he might see him in the afternoon. She goes, I immediately noticed that there was something quite wrong with this doctor. I told him that there was one or two things the matter with him. I wasn't going to say it there, but I did in Director Hurd's office. This man was in a stupor state from something he could hardly stand up or talk. So she's saying the doctor was basically drunk. The hospital was taking x-rays. He only had 80% vision. Uh, and then now they're saying here that they're describing how he was recalcitrant, the patient. He didn't want to stay. He left the place, and he was going to be discharged. This is John, right? All of his clothes were at FDR. He wanted to stay at the hospital. John stayed with us a while he was on pass. He went to SSI, and then he went to Dykeman Medical Building. He fell ill and went to see his doctor there. John started to get sick, shake all over, vomit. He went into convulsions. So basically, she's talking not about this beating as being a major thing. She's just talking about her brother, like, had all that. Like, imagine I read this whole thing. I'm going to just let you, I'm just going to let you screenshot this, read it yourself. You can always pause it. But basically, it's her going on for 4 pages about how the doctors sucked, how nobody would listen to them. Her brother was sick. He was found dead in a pool of blood on the floor of his bedroom with a quart bottle of rum and a small unopened bottle of rum, a bottle of sleeping pills, a pot of 5 needles. I feel my brother would not have died if he was given the proper medical attention and treatment and kept there where medicine and controllable. So she's basically saying here that her brother, by all accounts, she's not talking about the beating. She's talking about the bottle of rum and sleeping pills and rum and needles, and how he could have been alive if he was in the hospital. I thought the hospital was where he was getting the beating, right? So let's read some. So seems accurate for a VA hospital. I have to agree. We just had to deal with the VA in my family, and it's a nightmare. Surely, if he had been attacked in the hospital, would have reported the assault who did it. I smell bullshittery. If my relatives saw me beaten in the hospital, they would have gone to a police. Could there have been hospital been squashed? It would have been bad PR. Maybe, but I don't know. Sounds like hospital neglect. Right. But so here we have, I mean, again, you could go through this yourself. We raised John. Our father died. I was the only mother that he ever knew. He told me that Monday on the phone. No other person relative would have gone through what we went through, standing by him all the time. My husband's family, my relatives, all our friends know we did everything humanly possible to keep him alive. We can love but not heal. There are professional people who studied and trained for years to do this work. When I was informed of my brother's death, I called Director Hurd Montrose. He would not speak to me on the phone, so I left a message with his secretary that John had died. That evening, when we returned home for the making funeral arrangements, they were concerned whether John was already dead. I would not tell them the cause of death because they did not care for him when he was alive. There was an autopsy report pending. John had been bleeding profusely from the nose with large clots of blood since he had been brutally beaten in the hospital. Every step will be taken until justice is done. After being beaten, the doctor also gave him large doses of medication that made him fall to the ground, become very sick and unable to walk. John asked the nurse what was the name of the medication. She told him lithium, but refused to tell him the amount of micrograms. All right, so now I'm actually changing my mind a little bit. So it sounds here like he definitely was beaten in the hospital, and there might have been neglect with the hospital. Like what Ruby said, there might have been some bad, and maybe this is why they squashed it too. I don't know. But it sounds to me here that she's not so hot on like him being beaten, that he was dead because of being beaten, but that he was beaten up. He wasn't treated properly, and they put him on a lot of drugs, which then ended up causing him to be a drug addict again and die that way. But it sounds like she is a little concerned about the beating here. But there's no mention at all, as she mentions in 77, about a patient there that they noticed in the room next to him that had beaten him. And so all of a sudden the specter of David Berkowitz only appears post-arrest. Unlike with Wendy, there was no pre-arrest information, right? Like about an assailant. With Wendy, you had this identical sketch. You had the same MO. You had the smiling, which was his characteristic. You had him doing it in that same neighborhood. You had him in that same time period, the same crime. Everything was the same. Wendy was a son of Sam, a classic son of Sam killing. But this is a beating in a hospital. And we don't have, and that was, and Wendy's, again, pre-arrest, there was a lot of information pointing to Berkowitz. See, the cops thought so too. That's why the detective put her file into Donna Loria's file. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of differences between this and the Wendy story. And again, you could, what I'll do is I'll put these pages of her letter up on my YouTube post section, so you could read these for yourself. In fact, I'll put all these documents up there. We're going to see some. We have Ruby said we have the autopsy. We're gonna look at it in a second, and still she didn't report it to the police. Right? Exactly, Victoria. Seems like she should have been a lot concerned about debating, but what do I know? I don't know exactly what that means, but maybe that's in reference to something that I forgot about. So again, we have a post-19 arrest story from Margaret Sciblo and a pre-arrest story from Margaret Sciblo. And the only two factors that are the same are my brother was beaten. But in the pre-arrest Sciblo story, we have he was beaten, and then, you know, he's also a drug addict. They found him dead on the floor with rum and needles and sleeping pills, empty bottles. He was a drug addict. You know, we stood by him, but it was very hard. When he was beaten, they gave him all these drugs, and it really messed him up. And, you know, like that was kind of where this was going. Hospital neglect, like someone said. Not, you let out this serial killer that beat up my brother, right? So that came after the arrest. All of a sudden, David Berkowitz was at the VA hospital in Montrose. Now, what's crazy is that there is a possibility that Berkowitz could have been at the VA hospital in Montrose, and these people could have been correct. There is that possibility because Berkowitz was a vet, and in February of 1976 was a very nebulous time period for all of us in terms of where Berkowitz exactly was. It was that period when he was just leaving Barnes and just going to Cassara. And remember, with Cassara, they were saying that he was like, they thought he was a vet that was down on his luck. How do we know he didn't just come out of VA Montrose and had just beaten the shit out of somebody? We don't. Of course, we could find that out with searching the records. This is a very easy case to figure out. And of course, Berkowitz denied this, but he's denied everything. So we don't necessarily have to take that into account. But one of the things that we need to utilize in this case, in my opinion, is just our general common sense. I'm getting the vibe that you guys aren't buying Berkowitz as perpetrator in this. Right, exactly. So we need to see if he was right. And so we can employ actually our enemies at that. Chris Claw, get on it. Do something useful for once. Contact the VA in Montrose and see if Berkowitz was a patient there in February of 1976. You can exonerate your boy on something factually for the first time. Let's do it. Yeah. All right. So you guys have this, and I'm going to post this on my YouTube post section. And sincerely yours, Margaret Sciblo, the sister of the late John Kennedy, who lived right around the corner from me. So the medical examiner's on-scene report, which looks like shit. This was when they came to the apartment and they saw his dead body, 3/10/76. Arrival on scene, 1 o'clock in the morning, 50th precinct, age 41 years. So his age has changed a few times, but that doesn't bother me. Deceased has been at the VA hospital Montrose. He had been beaten up weeks ago, reported to state police, Buchanan and Montrose. So his beating was reported in 76, because this is from 76. And beaten up is in quotes. So that came from somebody's mouth. So that's probably Margaret Sciblo. He was nude. He was under psychiatric care for depression. He was also a drinker. He was seen yesterday afternoon. Caused. It's so hard to read, man. Let's just read empty bottle of Tuinol, maybe. I'm not quite sure what that even says. Body of 41-year-old prone on floor of bedroom, about almost empty apartment, has residence, but a bed, small TV set. So it's a sad life. Rigor mortis present. Bubbling foam from, I don't know what that says. Bloody, no gross external of something or other. So this was basically the examination of him at the scene, and the laboratory findings of his body on 3/11/76, samples of his brain, liver, blood, bile, stomach contents, and urine showed barbiturates, alcohol, amobarbitol and secobarbital, acidic and basic drugs, opiates not detected, and barbiturates 2.6 milligrams. So we had alcohol and barbiturates in his system, which I believe is a fatal mix. I don't know. Send it to me. I'll have ChatGPT read it. I'm going to put this all up on my post section. It's going to be in three or four separate posts because it's about 15 files. But you can have all of these files for yourself, and feel free to use them on shows if you care to. It doesn't really matter to me. They're public. So the autopsy of John Kennedy was conducted by Michael Baden in the presence of Dr. Baden, by Dr. Pearl. Body of a husky white male with marked anterior lividity. We're not going to go through all this. We're gonna go through the nut meat. Contusions of the posterior scalp, which possibly could have been post-mortem putrefactive change. So in other words, the only bruise they're seeing could have been done after his death. There is no skull fracture, no other hemorrhage or other changes of meninges of brain. Body opened, body cavities unremarkable. Heart 500 milligrams. Again, we don't need to read all this. No recent or myocardial infarction. Unremarkable. Urogenital system unremarkable. Sent for toxicology. Cause of death: chronic ethanolism with fatty liver, pending chemical examination. Acute ethyl alcohol, aminobarbital, and secobarbital poisoning, fatty liver. Right. So here it is. The cause of death, according to the medical examiner, Michael Baden, had nothing to do with his beating at the hands potentially of Berkowitz, but it was ethanolism with fatty liver. And then when they got the toxicology reports, because remember, sent for toxicology, and then we have the toxicology right here, laboratory findings. So they did that. They updated the autopsy, and they added acute ethyl alcohol and barbital, secobarbital poisoning, fatty liver. So he died of a drug overdose. Right. Sounds like a Xanax and alcohol, and it could be fatal. So what's Victoria said? So Victoria, you're getting into the Margaret Sciblo story. She stood by him and supported him until he ended up in the hospital because he was so addled by drunken drugs. So she just let him get in that state with no prior help. Yes, I know addicts can be devious, but it sounds like she's trying to blame others for her own shortcomings towards her brother. It could possibly be. I mean, that letter was crazy, and I might have made a mistake in not reading everything, but I didn't want to lose you guys. You know, you can read it on your own. It's not like it. The nut meat is more important than the details, I think. All right, so we're seeing here the autopsy. The autopsy report is very simple. He died of a drug overdose because he was drinking and he took secobarbitals and aminobarbitals. But Sciblo wouldn't stop, guys. She would not stop. Now, she doesn't keep up this pressure post-arrest. This is all pre-arrest. This is before she knows the name David Berkowitz. She's going crazy, trying to get everybody who will listen that he was beaten up. So she sends a letter to the Veterans Administration saying, yo, he was beaten up. What the hell are you going to do about this? So the VA says, we're sorry to learn of the death of your brother, who was a former patient. Our deepest sympathies is extended to you. In response to your inquiry concerning the late Mr. Kennedy received at the Montrose VA hospital, I have asked my staff to investigate the circumstances surrounding your brother's hospitalization, treatment, and discharge. The investigation revealed that Mr. Kennedy did receive medical attention and was treated for some of his problems from February 16th, 76 until discharge on March 8th, 76. 4 days before he was discharged, he was interviewed by the Substance Abuse Committee, and he was found in need of further treatment for his ongoing alcoholism problem. At this time, Mr. Kennedy refused to commit himself to a program of treatment to combat his alcoholism and change his lifestyle. His medical record indicate that it was the judgment of this professional staff that while he was in need of further treatment for his alcoholism, he was competent to be discharged. On March 8th, 76, he was discharged because an ongoing treatment program for alcoholism requires the commitment, cooperation, and voluntary participation of the client in the treatment regime. My staff has assured to me that Mr. Kennedy did receive competent professional care to the extent that he was willing to accept it. A number of other problems noted in your letter could not be substantiated in the manner in which you described them. Concerning the actual cause of your brother's death, we must reserve judgment at this time since the medical examiner's report is pending investigation. Thank you for bringing these matters to my attention. Please be assured that the VA desires to provide the best possible treatment. Okay, so they're saying here, yo, your brother was a drunk. We wanted to help him. He basically told us to go fuck ourselves, and he left voluntarily against our wishes. That's what that letter says in plain English to Sciblo. So it's a little different from, and it says, and furthermore, we can't substantiate your other allegations. So that means the beating. Okay, so this was actually, I didn't quite put this show in the proper order now that I'm reading it back, because these letters that she wrote was actually before the medical examiner's report. She was just so obsessed with her brother having been beaten. And this was before Berkowitz came into the mix. I'm going to give you my opinion of all this at the end. We're just gathering information here. But before Berkowitz came in the mix, she was obsessed with this beating, which she wouldn't stop complaining about. And it's unclear to me now, actually, whether he was beaten or not. I don't know. So the VA hospital now says, this is after the medical examiner reports comes, and they're still getting letters from Sciblo saying, my brother was beaten. What are you going to do? Mrs. Sciblo, thank you for your recent telegram with further regard to the treatment of your late brother. The assault on Mr. Kennedy was looked into at the time as it happened. It is true that he was attacked by another patient following an incident in which he had thrown a chair around the room. Your brother was examined by a physician who found no serious injury of any kind. Examination in the eye clinic revealed no impairment of vision. By now, you are undoubtedly aware of the medical examiner's report that the immediate cause of your brother's death was acute ethyl alcohol, anobarbital, and secobarbital poisoning. The barbiturates were not ordered for him while he was a patient at the hospital, nor is there anything to indicate that he obtained them there. In fact, the hospital pharmacy does not even stock secobarbital. Our own investigations have not demonstrated any evidence of hard drug trafficking at the Montrose VA hospital. As I wrote in my previous letter, Mr. Kennedy did, in our opinion, receive competent professional care to the extent that he was willing to accept it. It was unfortunate that he was unable or unwilling to adapt to the recommendations of the hospital staff. Exactly. So this is even more wording. Now that they have the medical examiner's report, they're like, yo, Sciblo, shove it up your butt, your blowhose, because this is ridiculous. First of all, Berkey's not even in the picture yet, right? They're just obsessed with this beating, and there's no seemingly penetrating at all that her brother was a drunken drug addict who obtained illegal drugs outside of the VA hospital, took them, drank alcohol at the same time, and then died because of it. So our last slide of the day, she doesn't stop at the VA. She goes to the top, the tippy top in the Riverdale area. The Congressman Jonathan Bingham himself. And now all y'all Maury Terry fans are going to go crazy because Jonathan Bingham's daughter was in the process. And Bingham was one of these blue bloods in Riverdale and knew Alfred Hunt Howell and was involved, excuse me, and was involved in processing and activity. I don't know, whatever they say. And actually, I believe that that's true. I believe that Bingham's daughter was involved in some weird occultic crap, and Bingham did know Alfred Hunt Howell. There's no doubt about that. But what's that got to do with anything? I have no idea. All right, so she bothers him even, and so he has to send the letter. And this is our last slide of the day. Coming from the Congress of the United States, Jonathan Bingham, July 7th, 1976. Remember, this is before Berkey's even a blip on the eye. This is even before Donna Lauria is shot. This is after Wendy, but before Donna. I have contacted Dr. Michael Baden, Deputy Medical Examiner, regarding your request for a copy of the original report of Dr. Pearl on the autopsy performed on your brother, John Joseph Kennedy, who died at 2800 Bailey Avenue, Bronx. I have indicated to Dr. Baden that you are apparently refusing to accept the explanation he gave to Mrs. Ruth Mezen, my district representative, which she relayed to you, that in the normal course of events in the medical examiner's office, an autopsy report is typed up, reviewed and corrected, and a final report issues, that there is sometimes a long lapse of time because of the need for information from police and chemical analysis, that the information given to Dr. Chase of the Veterans Administration Department of Medical and Surgery might have been preliminary information because there was an initial report on a temporary basis and a temporary death certificate issued, that the final report was completed on June 30th, the very day you were in my office, and it is available to the family for review, and they could speak to the personnel involved if they wish. That you wish to have original report prepared by Dr. Pearl. When I hear from Dr. Baden, I'll be back in touch with you again. With best wishes, Jonathan Bingham. And that, my friends, is the last slide, and that's where we leave it, with Margaret Sciblo and her brother, John Kennedy, who she claims was killed by David Berkowitz while her brother was sitting in a bed at the Montrose VA hospital, where David Berkowitz was also. Berkowitz administered a huge beating to him, and even though the doctors found really he was beaten, but it wasn't that big a deal, and he was medically examined as a drug death, the family was obsessed with this thought that he was beaten first, and then, of course, after Berkowitz was arrested, they were obsessed with the thought that it was Berkowitz who had killed their brother. So give me your opinions, guys. Somebody want to call in and give me their opinion on this? And then I'll editorialize and give you what I think was the most likely scenario. And I have a feeling we're all going to agree. So give me a second here. So here's what I think. So first of all, I do not think Berkowitz killed John Kennedy. Okay. I just want to, one of the main reasons I wanted to do this show, not was to wow you with all these documents, because they're actually kind of stale and dry and boring, but was to show you that at the same time that I'm sitting with a story like Wendy Savino, I'm also sitting with a story like this. So this notion that Manny Grossman is out here trying to make a name for himself and trying to pin every crime on Berkowitz and trying to find crimes to fit to make it him in order to get my name in the New York Post. Did I do that with this one? Now, I couldn't have, because it's clearly not Berkowitz. But if I actually was that venal, attention hounding I could have easily manipulated this into and left out a lot of information and manipulated if I wanted to, right? Which I don't, because that's not just not what I am. I showed you every document that I have. But if I was an unscrupulous actor, I could have made it turn into another victim of Berkowitz. I could have just left out all the autopsy stuff, given my opinion, and said, "Believe me, because I'm who I am." That would have been it. If I truly was the person that these people are accusing me of. So I just wanted to put this out there that no, not every crime is a Berkowitz crime. There were people just like Wendy who were coming to the Bronx DA after Berkowitz was arrested and saying, Berkowitz killed my brother or my sister or my father or my aunt, uncle, and not all of them were true. You have a story like Wendy's, and then you have a story like Margaret Sciblo. So what do I think happened? It's very simple, and you probably agree. I believe that this guy was probably beaten. Sciblo came to visit her drug-addicted brother in the hospital, saw some bruises. She seems a little hysterical. She probably made a much bigger deal out of it than it really was. Instead of dealing with the fact that her brother was a stone cold addict, alcoholic, drug addict, she just perseverated on this beating. The beating gave her the out she needed. My brother wasn't a drug addict. No, he didn't die of a drug overdose. He was beaten, right? So I can understand her psychological motivation to protect her brother and all that before Berkowitz was arrested and he even came in the picture. I can see why she was perseverating on this being beaten business, which she definitely was. But what I think after she got the cold shoulder from everybody and everybody basically brushed her off by July of 76, as you see, this was the last correspondence ever given to her, ever. Right? So until Berkowitz was arrested. And I believe that she tried to use that notoriety and try to pin it on him in order to bring attention back on her brother's case. And I don't believe that Berkowitz had anything whatsoever to do with this. And so Chris Claw, you could let your boy know that I'm not trying to pin everything on him, that we actually are discerning here at the Grossman Files, that we deal in reality. And this is just not her motivations to lie are too great. Lorenzo always taught me that the main question you need to ask in any criminal investigation is, what's the person's motivation to lie? Wendy had no motivation to lie. She wasn't trying to cover up for her husband, as people say. She wasn't trying to cover up for a mob hit. Wendy had no motivation to pin this on Berkowitz, but Sciblo actually did have motivation to pin this on Berkowitz. And it could have led to monetary if she had been able to prove that Berkowitz was a patient there, that they let him out, and then he went out and did. Imagine the story of that he went out and did Son of Sam when he was a captive patient at the VA, and that he beat somebody up there. Imagine the publicity and the story that would have been in New York City if that had actually been true. So I can understand her motivation. It was altruistic to try to get more attention for her brother, and also, I believe, totally monetary based. And she wanted a payout from the city of New York. So that's basically it. Yeah. People think they know Bliss, right? Exactly. So yeah, that not only would that have made the papers, that would have been a huge scandal when people actually cared about these things back then. This would have been a huge scandal if Berkowitz had been a patient at FDR. So let's actually talk now about things that might mitigate within favor of Sciblo. And the only thing that I can think of in this regard is the fact that you cannot fully discount the notion that Berkowitz was at a VA hospital in February of 76. The only way to rule that out is to actually get the records from Montrose, which probably exists. Again, Claude, do your thing. Go. That's a useful thing for you to do. Um, what would happen if we found that Berkowitz was indeed a patient there? What would we do? Right? That would change history in a way. But I have a feeling that he wasn't, for two reasons. One, there's really no record of that. That I think that would have been recorded in his history somehow. And number two, uh, why would he go to Montrose when he could have gone to the VA in the Bronx, which was only like 10-minute drive away from his apartment? It made no sense. But the notion of him being a psychiatric patient in February of 76 as an inpatient, checking himself in possibly, it's not far-fetched. So what we should do now is wait until Chris Claw sends her FOIA requests to the Montrose VA, and then next month she'll write a blog about it. All right, guys, I think that's basically all I want to discuss. Again, this wasn't a comedy show. This was sort of more old school information. And I figure, I've been sitting on these documents a while. Why not just put them out into the public domain and get another conversation started in Son of Sam? All right, guys, I'll talk to you later.